给家地把莫拉的呢，同把跟来准子嘛，准嘛要拉香杂罗，我们记得嘛，我们准嘛拉香杂罗，香子准嘛年嘛花么，天天干正龙登场，一到三摩七几下地，给是下人的香，香子东个拉瓦跟的，公安家能走不下。东朝左巴南地，绕的几个人把嘛，想着谁人家那弟弟，把们兄弟那不是家，人把村这个对着哇，左巴上的学人家，想着对象小不子的人，他也那不是家里中，阿里巴巴真把托背，家人自己先得对，想着的大让我一个，都能小到南可刚。等不下金南地，里边没半个半年，想着家是没拉藏吧，弄了那种往行车。不如龙之山南当，路经左近的那段，想着的一家的发地，怕是中国人的家嘛。我也更有一下的难的，没不能只把心的嘛。想着的人就把进步的计划我能不能做？自己家的中年单子，找我能什么里做？想着工作什么时候的，什么这个难不能讲。阿里小金锅罗干呗，人个我进从能吃。想着รับ的个这不，我因为经常而飞。下巴拉只的达拉伊，等到几等往等他，想着啥就因为做能，他们就够把你满年。昨年有一个红哥，碰破他们只那么的准，想着大个东和见了讲把他们只先等吧，然后昨年我碰没了，倒不是先多人他，想着个人他妈没得让把人成为难的，一定用够跟你过给，然后红的那不能做，想着啥就用我那些个，他今天真下激动。朝年站在一个红哥，把灯不能不能给，想着的大概嘛些嘛，你看大几学人家，从单到单吧，都把钱不就把年，想着跟你过了咖啡，咖啡里那啥灯给，一个结婚的过别，六把红里准嘛年，想着这里想的大别，红哥那么3年，人马到那灯不行，只等送那有2年，想着还因最难别，人到大真成难难。当然你这把几个都能马里把那些嘛，想着还做那么点儿包，老他妈干几天嘛，跟地过这个绝地，啥都没那么安把些嘛，想着你妈老二爹比见你把了我的山，当然你这个大大爷现在这不人那些，想着对娘生老过辈，见他咋样都当。रोनो नजन सोनम जंबा तरा राम चन्या सारगा की तो बंद तो लाभ शब्दरा नन्य चर्चाशु जितन भमा जुमा जिम जितन जितन दंगर कने जादोस जितन भमा जुमा जिम जितन जितन दंगर कने जादोस जितन भमा जुमा जिम जितन जितन दंगर कने जादोस तारे 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 जुहा तारे 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 जुहा तारे 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 जुहा dare 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 so 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 yarim drama kirbe chenra no kodar ke se ta dan jangam da ki kim sam jong bo chenra tinra konra da so nyur sho Yamsan chokka ngudra ni pamam chone jisa chang kurdam khanru mambuk Jiji jisa dodra ji shenji laji Shasa soro mahom banzran gara pama sarda Yarge na shanta pama kesara dombol Yamsan chokka ngudra ni pamam chone jisa chang Kurdam khanru mambu kura jiji jisa dodra ji shenji laji shasa gara pama sarda Yarge na shanta pama kesara dombol Yamsan chokka ngudra ni pamam chone jisa chang Kurdum kanju mambu kuru kiki jisi dabzhu ki shingi lachi shazizu guru bama sirdu Oma banzir guru bama sirdu Oma banzir guru bama sirdu Oma banzir guru bama sirdu Kila da jang sura da bim di to so kang do ne bi sa sho sa na dang war pong da zu jua Chu dong zhan xin be ren da de sura Yen yen na xiang zang ba ma ke sir dong bo la Yam sun chu ku ngu zhe ni ba ma zhong ne ji se zhong Kurdum kanju mambu kuru kiki jisi dabzhu ki shingi lachi shazizu guru bama sirdu Yen yen na xiang zang ba ma ke sir dong bo la Yam sun chu ku ngu zhe ni ba ma zhong ne ji se zhong Kurdum kanju mambu kuru kiki jisi dabzhu ki shingi lachi shazizu guru bama sirdu Yen yen na xiang zang ba ma ke sir dong bo la Yam sun chu ku ngu zhe ni ba ma zhong ne ji se zhong Kurdum kanju mambu kuru kiki jisi dabzhu ki shingi lachi shazizu guru bama sirdu Oma banzir guru bama sirdu Oma banzir guru bama sirdu Oma banzir guru bama sirdu Kila da jang sura da bim di to so kang do ne bi sa sho sa na dang war pong da zu jua Chu dong zhan xin be ren da de sura
Om Nam Tada Nam Da Ram Chen Len Zhe Bo Dai Xi Zhong Jin Jiang Na Zhu Ba Yi Sang Ji Chu Gin Dan Ba Bo Tho Gan La Shang Tran Da Jia Zai Xi Xiong Zhong Mei Jiang Ta Dan Dong Zhe Gong Shan Bei Jiang Hua Ge Zhang Hua Dan Ba Gan La Gong Ba Jia Zhi Zhang Lân Bo Dan Bo Sa Zhe Hua Dan Ne Sim Jin Dam Jin La Gong Zhang Bo Hua Ra Ye Zhen Da Ba Da Ra Zhe Hua Ra Dim Zhen Zhen Du Zha Xi Hua Be Re Ba De Re Xiang Ba Jian La Shang Zhan Lun Jia Hua La Zhe Hua Dan Du Jin Dan Xia Re Dong Gong Bo Shan Bo Hua Ra Sa Yi Nyang Bo Zhe Ba Nan Be Re Se Re Nan Ki Yang Bo Pang Chu Gun De Bakar Le Xiang Da No Re La Wa Ra Zhi Nye Ma Yi Shang Zha Lao Neng Zha Xi Hua Jin Shang Zhe Zhen Hua Jian La Shang Zha Luo Ren Jin Deng Zhong Zha Xi Se Jin Dun Zhong Wen Zhong Ye Wong Ga Ma La Nian Zhe Dong Da Ben Zuo Hua Ri Mân Giang Zhen Huang Jin Gu Lu Di Ren Jin Dang Zhong Jie Ji Shang Zhen Jin Shu Di Jia Qiu Chang Ji Pi Le Ma Gong Su Ngo Zhan Bei Huan Bei Re Wa Zha Xi La Mu Jia La Shong Zhen Lo Zang Ba Qin Bu Dim Zhong Zhen Mei Wa Mer Dong Dan Dang Jie Bu Yin Gu Re Zhong Ba Ji Bo Dang Long Mer Mo Zang Nam Tu Zhen Bei La Zhen Gu Lu Zhen Xie La tam dong dong dor ji jana pawan ra chum chu tin jam sin jana sa sam ne su ge la tra ji pe lan ju tin jong wa ja la sam sa lo da ja tam sha wa tum ba la ga ta ni wa se wa kun shin do dong huan ba sam da ye shin de tra ji de la pa sam zo pa shu mong shi de jin ba wang ge bo zhang de de dong zo de dong ba yi ji ge ma jiang de na ba mi rang jin de do jian nian ma nang a jian bo huan ju ge nang an dai do ji ju ju dian wang ju de ji ji jiang de ba ma jia bong guan de wang ji nang zhe zhen nang wang jin he ra ga song a yi xin ban zhen wa ra he dim chong do bei jia bong de jin de ma le jie ge yong zhou de jin ma zhou de na shang jin wang ju de dong ge wang zi le do ji wang wu zhang ge dong na dong nian ba jin bo hang ni de de do ji ge ga ji zhe sima yong gang me sang ge jia zhi gang sim ge wo zi ma bu ko de yong la jie zhi ji dang ji de yu zhang de bu de do ji zhang ba jin bo de ji na nam ni wu zhang do kim zhong de zhang do ji xia ji zhang ba jin bo yi nang zhi de wa jin bo dong xi de ba dai jin zhi zhan wo ru ge la jian de ji gong wo xi wa jin xi ba ram zhe dang song wan ge la song la ki bi su wan de su mu zhe de ne qian zhe wo se nge xiang ga me san jia me hui de ji xian la ye de la ma na je me de ban zo jia la so ba de gong ji de to ba po ba xin ji lo ne chin re wo se nge jiang gam san jia me hui de ji xian la ye de la ma na je me de ban zo jia la so ba de gong ji de to ba po ba xin ji lo ne chin re wo se nge jiang ga me san jia me hui de ji xian la ye de la ma na je me ban zo jia la so ge gong jin ban po xin ji lo
Khenpo Rinpoche, venerable monks, and everybody else, a very warm welcome to this talk organised by the Cambridge University Buddhist Society. It is a true privilege to be able to listen to Khenpo Sodaji Rinpoche speaking this evening. He is one of the most eminent teachers of the Buddha Dharma in China and becoming increasingly known in the West as well. He had a thorough and deep training in Tibetan Buddhist theory and practices, so he had the traditional Tibetan Buddhist training for a monk. And since then, he's devoted himself for the last 30 years to making the Buddha Dharma accessible to as many people as possible in a form that enabled lay people as well as monks to have a really thorough Buddhist education. If you were watching the video earlier, Khenpo Rinpoche is the senior teacher at Larongga Five Sciences Buddhist Institute, Buddhist Academy, and he's using the internet and increasingly making contact in the West. He's visited many universities in the West in order to, I think, get us to engage with this extraordinary set of teachings. So he comes from a deeply traditional Tibetan Buddhist background, but he's very involved in integrating traditional Buddhist practices with the problems of the modern world. And he's also very interested and engaged in integrating what could be taken as a contemplative tradition with action out there in the world. He's founded a charity to support education, to support nursing care. He stresses the importance of compassion and looking after the poor, not just sitting on the cushion and practicing for ourselves. And in the case of Cambridge, yes, this is a place of great privilege, but it is also, as many of you here will know, a place where there is also a lot of suffering. Suffering that comes from modern lifestyle, suffering that just comes from being human beings. And what the Buddha Dharma has to offer all of us is some sort of way of finding healing for that suffering. So very much in the spirit of Khenpo Rinpoche's wish to help all of us find our own way, that he's going to give a talk tonight on the Buddha's path in practice, an end in itself or a means to a better world.
Lopchandani tani the Nautanga Chutsoko tani Tsokso tani Letna Marna Yongda the Maimbagan tani Girgan tani Lopcho Tamadam Nyam the Stavi tani Skachapsha Lojon Shiji Korku Shongala nga rangoni nyang thakpa ne gaps gapchochi.
Tonight to have this opportunity to come here to give a teaching, also have this opportunity to learn from you, from the members of the Cambridge Students Buddhist Society and teachers, everybody who has come here tonight. Khenpo wants to extend a very heartfelt thanks.
Chapter Lojitni Yoni Kirgan the Raptor Chonga Kunamba Mombo Chonyon Re Talo Nitsu and the Talan Shone Lojit Tani Raptor Chonga Mombo Dang Nyam the Lojon Shiki Dang Tani Roland Shiki Korku Yabo Shonyo Shichuk Ta Chundi Yina teni logi ke chozu da shangji ke cho teni wogi ke cho tar nambak samga nga sanjip chondon de ge chulik chaman di onre tena da terang teni ngi nguni na nga so wogi ke na tan chulik ware teni terang logi ke da terang chutsok ke chokso ya mambozu de teni logi ke na tan chulik wa yin sare teni na ngetso ya nyam dan thanjur gurguni teni chama rolan shi gyondoyang chi chatam phobajire.
And looking around the audience, I'm particularly glad to see so many ordained members of the Theravada tradition in the audience. this year in Thailand, we had a conference and I had an excellent opportunity to engage in discussion and exchange with members of the Theravada, the southern tradition. In general, we speak of the southern tradition, the northern tradition, the Tibetan tradition. In any case, they're all part of the Buddha Dharma. And I'm really grateful to have this opportunity, and I hope that we can engage with each other in a very united way.
Tani ngala samsar kare yorejana ta tirap nishiba nzina tani jarkab ko parna yang chu tan chuglong mongo menchuk mongo yotsi tirap zire tani ta ji chulu parnsam yinna ra man nankar gyang tatsu tajang mombo yosaga tirap zire ta tani tirap nyerchik bane zong tani te zamzu mayo baga tani jarkab par yinna raga chuluk bar yinna raga kharshuk da nashuk mug warna ya tani ta damchang ga tirap zayida chama pansan nyamda rera chi tamzu yotsi tirap muksar janz ga song yore.
So I guess to sort of start off with my thoughts about the 20th century, which is one that was characterized by a great deal of conflict, a great deal of struggles between different peoples, between different religious sects or religious traditions. It was in general a century of great violence. We've now arrived in the 21st century, and in some sense we can see that it has been a time where there has been an opportunity for greater communication and collaboration and cooperation in many fronts.
Ta ndi kapsina tani perna sharshuk ngatsu mambo jiga tani nabshuk ta ngubo yarge ya chimbu songyoni tani chanrig lakhsar chanrig shisha ndzo tamchat hlojong shi dana tani rangrang sosun choi nanda pechchu sheyang shegonre karsan derang sharsho eshiya ga yakub mambo jiga nabshuk chanrig dela tani yarge phasum soba rodang rojin bare 대당 라바고 ngatu nopshugna yuni tani ji shion ba nan ra loma nan ra sin na yang ngatu sharshug bana tani sharshug da sanglu parmjur sanglu tani shion yang samji meche ba za na ni da war de hagon re ndso yang chit de la songwe da lojong shi ji zina chigde sharnam nyamjer yong ji da nis anna dang dangrap 안나당 니가 냠저 용지 단 데라 녜테나 구바 첨부 늑삼
어디 탐보지를
가쇼고 마차가 넙쇼고 찬릭 시릭 로종라 되는 넙쇼고 마 탐뜻 샤르크다리 출르다 르니 안나다 땅거 되는 카르납다 안나당 니가 판선 로종단 데라시니나 구반도
So we can see that over the past century and in recent times, using scientific methods that were first developed in the West, people in Eastern countries have been able to improve their material standard of living in certainly in very discernible ways. At the same time, however, the West is also learning from the knowledge traditions, the very amazing knowledge traditions of the East. And so it's my sincere hope, in fact, that people from both parts of the world and can learn from the benefit of each other's traditions.
나와 상기비 출루 접설라 때네 더가 마오와 다 라닉 저데 라나메 파테르나레다 테네 지 신속 초트 테네 지르득 담비 마오 달람 양딱 바즈 트르네레지기 단 디르던거 테네 참마라 냐지 도르 디바찬즈 지르기인.
So, in terms of the topic for tonight's teaching, I'm going to be addressing the practice of the Buddha's teachings and whether, in fact, they are a means to gain advancements in a personal practice or whether they are a means for achieving benefit in the wider world.
Sure, 상기가 출력제로한데 양 다 인군이나 루무즈가 tani jimjig ta lojong kala kansam she yong re te yindi ngi tatsar zgla kare jena ta na sanji ge chulig zgin de pe ya chewa da tang zapa tenja zre te yindi khu jimje de ji ta tsu jig da ni ge jirta jindam chun go na te hajang gawe ne sikero zre
Chizuri?
다 측용용 그거 산지가 잡지가 죽음 제ben데 잠판 주치제단 랑거 대화 냠섬 용치제르고나 더 측용시즈 그거 배 갈리 카본두
So I've been engaged in the investigation and the study of Buddhism for a very long time, and in my opinion, when we look at the question of what the Buddha Dharma is and what the Buddhist tradition is, that it is in fact extremely vast, and it's quite difficult to put into a few words what its essence is.
옛날에 tene 추가 다돈도 냠슬랑디 tene 충가리가 나나 남지가 내금나 라니가 타라 양딱바 톱니 타라 양딱바 톱니 tene 고비야 양서 뇽버 지네 다 뇽모와다 등을 짱메피 tene 땀 영을랜데 바제르고 난자가 데스타비 제베 톱기오 떠용 답가로 몽우즈 그랑아 데스타고 니르고네레지 텐자양 손사요레
Of course, it is said that the purpose of practicing the Buddhist tradition is to obtain liberation, is to eradicate one's afflictions, and to pass beyond this existence and abide in the state of nirvana.
양 충가래 그감나 제베도 톱송디 제베도 톱냈더니 딱 베르나 다리가 샘친 그돈 접교 산기 그 꼬마토 쏘나야 다른 몸 터네 되니 샘친 그돈 접교 운동 조가 있는데 때려 쏘요래
According to other ways of saying it, or to other voices of the tradition, after one has obtained Buddhahood, one should exert oneself to the benefit of other beings and dedicate oneself primarily to these tasks.
베나 데 자화추름 보치 제게도 복고 타거나 빼 냥가 그바 전부들에 다 공연나 길로 직get네 다리 get다나 직get게치 캬글로 와르다 다리가 지그니 디모고 라마 짝천들에 콩국 송니 다 셔슌고 군름 그갑나 저송르잖아 산기 돕기원데야 대가 무연 타르트바 말해세 산기 돕네 지실 건전 조 잔돈 잔로아 샘전 담적 돈 줍교 단 득조를 제야 빼 사로 군에 송래
In the words of Palchu Rinpoche, who was an extremely renowned master from the Tibetan tradition who lived in the 19th century, he said in reference to the objectives of Buddhahood that obtaining Buddhahood is not, he said very clearly, it's not to obtain Buddhahood as an objective or a means in itself, but rather to use one's Buddhahood for the benefit of other sentient beings.
때런다네 gergen가레가 양송건도 회나 다 추지기도 오마 가성되는 거 로아가 뭐 담책 그낫세를 시지 낫세르가 되네 페나 만타버리진도 당운이 저 가수 추고 난돈 마시바다나 출라 차기 메바이나 거요 말에 된다 캐말레나야 다 당운이 저 춘데라 짐직시는다 춘데 냠슬레는진디 가수 뭐라나 소수 샘컴나 판토 야침보 요거요래
Tonight, when I met earlier with Dr. Rachel, she likened the Buddha Dharma to an extremely healing medicine for many people in today's age. This is very, very much the case. Of course, to people who don't have an understanding of the contents of the teachings or don't have a great familiarity, then, well, it's difficult to say. But to people who commit themselves to understanding the teachings and to practicing the teachings, the benefit can be very, very great indeed.
다 랑아 지금 냠레 시사가 추 샘는 거 낫다 등을 세시 그 때다 추징매나 가선되는 거 신속도 촉직네 되나 배 응보 빠르용 야르기 되니 추르근 직전이나 앉아 코리기 난자 끈그 타니양 뒤로 가마다 잠들시니나 로미 로르기타나 되니 배 만자와가 야르기 퍼섬 소바 쇼요기 뒤수 된자가 토요래 양 쇼직네 되니나 ngasu ruwa maga tene nang semgi dungmer nang semgi nazik tele jang chabram phaba dik hajan cheba dungmer chi ragba tendawe ne sikero.
On the one hand, we can say that the current age that we live in is certainly unprecedented in terms of the degree of development of external material conditions. At the same time, it is also one where probably we are at a point of unprecedented suffering as well.
가리제나 가선대랑 다 당선 그 뒤촌데라 tene 코리거 tene 코리 막족스 기르네 다 가국이 양다바 매바다나 대비전도는 지금 코리 그 야금도 추나나야 다 멘츠 만보 용에다 되네 뭐 탐칠라 된적 매바다 되네 가수 에시아라 소바가 양 야금 만보 제릭 자마다는 디촌양 다 지금 초르된 여보 매니 제릭양 자몰라나 빼 만자 만보 따르기 요지 네츠
And all kinds of incidents transpire around us, every day, all the time, whether it be stories of environmental destruction, of pollution, of wars between countries, or as in Asia, particularly in China these days, there's a great deal of worry and concern about food safety, for instance.
Permsona de shini arjar kurtavina ta lo ngani ta gvar da janchi yongre tan de janchi ge jurum chot ta parchir mo mbum khsam da chkhchi yarmar tene tari chekchok zamet songeda shetsariore.
If we take a look at the Syria conflict, for example, over the past 5 years, approximately 300 people have lost their lives. 300,000 people have lost their lives.
That tele wherna murton shichin shewa chik zamz tene taron janchig kori ke chotna dungur samgi me kebam nyonjin yobada yang ta shewa ta shichin chik zamz ke tene chotso jigya yarmarda 다 yarkab me dener sabshuk soso capturean rogoyore ya chotso jigya yarmarz tene korang sachana tene gyosa rna men diksa yina me de ta rangir yarkab na thana kimsang nesa ya me de denji pe manje dar kyoyo ne sigeryor.
And upwards of 1 million people have been rendered displaced through this conflict too. So there are approximately 600,000 people within the country's borders who now don't have homes, and another 400,000 people who are refugees in bordering countries.
다 당래 상로 당대군이 나총 주암 참마더 길득 찍바 상로 찍바 연거요래 예요래다 이나야 다 야급 라라 나한테 때타베 그 멘식 잡침보 쇼용디 되네 베나 유럽 그 야급 암선네나 되네 야급 모즈그 다 capture한도 또 땅는 책이요래 인지네나 간제 초랑수 시기래.
So even though, we are all human beings, we are the same in this respect, we're the same in our thoughts, etc. Certainly our circumstances are different depending on where we come from. In some countries there are wars, and then there are countries in Europe, for example, that are on the receiving end of the refugee situation. And as for the response in England to that, I'm sure you're all sure.
가스다리 nga de capture an gare gan choa ga choda nyamji len nywa ta ngone jane koran hachang jobore tene thana rang dosa ga ni yang me de chamsa ye me matsik chi ga tinda jor gona nga su chu ga na rang li la pe lo ne jalang no pa ma shi chi ze 베나 랑아 베롱에 장거 초라데 간데리 저런 거 또송래 근데 다 닝운이 나 체남발라 지 잡주로가 다 그래와 자지 왕차요 말이다 이나야 나츠 다 로미 링가레라 테스타비 등은 정디 삼록동 고사스 랩상고요
And I would urge everybody to really think about what it's like, what the plight of people in a situation in the situation of being a refugee is like, having no safety, no home, having one's immediate existence at threat. Of course, I'm not in a position to make any requests of anybody, but I think this is something that we should definitely cast our minds to and try to empathize with.
디 샤완도 수타네 나 가수 랍도 총아이나 드네 스크 타네 장 왕차다 된자 요 말이다 옛나야 셈 그다네 자모롱도네 서간당 깡이나 가수 수안록던 거요
So even though we might not have any particular power or capacity to do much, nevertheless we certainly need to really think about this.
가레 선로도나 다 자와 랍도 총아 짜메차 너수 드네 곰바 작프 드네 다 르서 띠남스 드네 다 코론조 주반양르시 유징능 마토 되면 신속고 초다 드네 다 말의 용의 시한도 조줍교원도 추양다 말의 썸다 된자 공크야 요나타
And in terms of being a monk, being an ordained person, whether or not these outside things are things that we should think about, maybe some people are of the view that the role or the proper role of an ordained person is to reside in their monastic institution, practicing the Dharma according to tradition, and in fact involving oneself or concerning oneself too much with things taking place on the outside world is not appropriate.
다티 다리 공도 집았다래 랍도 총아이 난자가 드니 추박 잠바가 켐바초이 난자가 나추 랭긴 요바치레제나 라니 긍요거 드니 조암 무조 시사가 드니 코리거 드니 뭐 탐치게 난자가 드니 리거 등월 셈거 등월 너수 세리 타다 좀바 쉬지도 네 되나 나추 뭐 참아가 드니 저르드 메피 랭겐 But
in my opinion, actually, as an ordained person, and in fact, regardless of whether one is ordained or whether one is a lay person, as a Buddhist, it is really a fundamental responsibility for us to be very concerned about the situation of sentient beings in the environment around us.
신속원에 처리나 갈성대랑 드니 지금 네처 찹친 배 뭔뭐 요거 잔측 마인 바가 배나가서 샘는 거단 나즈 등을 너초 있나 잠물는 거 땅나 네배 총사즈 그잖아 다 동체르거나 있나 드니 냠저 야속 초르된 레칸 다 냠저 야속나 다림 초르된 거 초바요라 다 코층 거세니나 드니 단 잠물는 거뭐 탐치 소브르 쉐키거 드니 락차 위와 너 동체르거나 인세레 다티 루르가 감나 드니 단 잠물는 거뭐 탐치 소시거 드니 락차 안 땅오도 녀가 나트레 아니바도 동체르거나 인세세요레
So the various challenges that we face in the world obviously are not restricted simply to conflicts. In terms of physical suffering and mental suffering, you know, one thing or maybe one small area or not so small would be that of depression. The WHO has claimed that over the last 5 years, that they have predicted that within the next 20 years, the second major cause of illness in the world will be depression, the first being a heart disease.
때랑 네 담보 동체르가 나때 디즈죠. 되니 콤바요나 양이 같이 잠바지요.
So tonight I'd like to say a few things about depression, and then if there's time permitting at the end, then maybe I'll talk about a few other things too.
가르제는데 인지롱바가 왕도 쉬나요? 답 파르칠 뉴 야차니 시사직 데라다리 동치르그 나요너를 젠도.
And the reason that I'd like to talk about depression is that I have heard that in England 26% of the population suffer from depression.
당이 가선데랑데 인기력이 약금나 녀다 시친 다 찍다 하고서 여러와 단그 야채니 시자지가 수이 결혼디 파르칠 시친 찍다 그 시총 찍이야만 대인디 파르칠 다 뉴지가 다리 동서 끝나다 찍이요차 양초그 송도다 그때인데 대랑 아춘디나야 당상 그사르지 너소 된니나 오늘 동서 끝난 몸몸 버처도 요사 몸보 요시지.
So England, a country with a population of more than 60 million people, if 26% of this population suffers from depression, then that means that approximately 16 million people are suffering from depression. So 1 in every 4 people.
회나 다니르동 주질로 그 야나가 데 종쇼 마마 차버 띠르갑나 다니 가선데는 야나나양 다뭐 시친 그 대양초다 다 동식 또 니동 주질로래 파르치다 니동 정학으로 달로네 동시르치 양초 뭐 요시체 네 가마르디 니동 주질에 다된디 회나 야나 그 동서 금뭐 동서리 요차가 뭐 대소 수익이로나 단다나 이탈리에 때니 흔한데 때니 다리 응소 인지를 약국 섬금을 양 우가르와즈다 카르데르 야능나요 요체이다 jonshuk ikchachakrka naxsaru sheoga.
And in terms of these statistics in China, it's also extremely serious. According to an official count from 2014, it was claimed that 90 million people in China suffer from depression. So, that's the equivalent of a combination of Holland, maybe France and Australia combined together. That many people in China are suffering from depression. Holland, Austria, and England. Yes, all of these countries, their population combined, that many people.
치레드나 땅에 셔동거 내 동서지도 나가만이 요바지래 회나 로지 땅선로다나 तने ता छारिक बा छेम्बो न्यूटन तने आइस्टान ता खोंला सोबा पेना ता अमरगी चंजन लोसफो जेकिनरा तने चिजियर जेकिनरा तेरनाबा यांतारे न्द योजि ताना इच्छामंबोना शेयोरे.
So depression is an illness that has existed in the past. It's said that many famous people, including Einstein, Newton, Roosevelt in the States, Churchill in England, all suffered from depression.
Tele mambo jigdayan tongser gna ka shwayan sheore khirna tsomba bo chakchen tene gamcho tang gambo ger tsomba bo tene hawi mendana 대전도는 어ፁ 야리스도도 콘소 있니나 다 하위민 랑가랑아다리 부구게 산나레 되니 야리스도 인저지나 코럼 초낭암 총나레 따때 마임바가 회나 시틀 인저지나 양 그런 거 공화 뜨글려대 되고 더 흔으레 반고 인저지나 야 동서가 나까는 랑가랑아 부구게 다 시와 데라 속바가 그 동서가 나다테네다는 랑수 겨도야 치망보요레.
It's also said that a great number of literary and artistic figures have suffered from depression, and many have even committed suicide as a result of their depression. These people including authors such as Hemingway, philosophers such as Aristotle, and even political figures such as Hitler.
Shirna 네 동철 난그 파르체르다리 섬착 직장즈 라랑 소소 다 랑소시죠 대시게요래 다 당상 잠불는 거 완도시나 로레진도 머철 야탄바 되네 동철 날라테네 랑거랑 다리 랑소시게 요래
It's said that a third of people who suffer from depression will take their lives, and indeed every year in the world today there are 10 million people who do commit suicide.
동철근 나트 치모즈긴레즈나 항아마 네 폴로이다 좀바 보적천 다 콩거 드니 냥은다 동철집이 때비지 그럽나 동철제제도 쉬 바로 그 직된 때라 무바짱 매바당 랑거 초아때라 이찬네 등거지 용서 저와 드니 띠떡버진다 랑거랑 소프르시스톰삼 다 랑든 직된 감나다나 돈덕 지양 마카 삼기 띠따비가 묵슬 그 샘기 나타버jan지 연저래
Freud, in his work Mourning and Melancholy, described depression as an illness where one loses one's desire for the outside world. One loses all interest, in fact, in the outside world. One loses one's hope in oneself, and in general becomes extremely despondent and afflicted by ennui.
야 뭔가를 그 회나 때랑 니마 마시려 남시 마요디 샘직 마르티노 nga 동철 그나야 그 삼고는나 양 가르가 잠 와르다 그 다지 자미 비에 그 샘 마르티데 저런데 양 런가 nga 동철 그나 그 야고 삼나 양 가르가 지금 총제에 총 남조 역보메디 드네 양샘 마르티디 대소 동철 삼인다나 삼철 요사레다 데 말에 다 티 동철근나 그 우어도 가르잖아 티 떡버 진다 다 그런 직된디 다 어떤 거 단나 드니 돈덕 마크스에 랑거랑아 예차바다 랑거랑아 보바메바 다 티타비 셈즈이래
Of course, some people might claim when they are feeling in general down for various reasons in life, maybe their business isn't going well or they're having some other kind of life problem, that they're feeling depressed. Well, this kind of, feeling of being depressed is not what we're referring to by depression. Clearly, depression is a more serious state where one's hope is extinguished, one feels very despondent, and one has very little confidence.
당 닝운이 낭운이 저 동철근 난데라 할레짓 쌈 할레바가 쌈로 동구요 동구비 염선데요 땅아 떡버드 드니 갸는컴마 다나 대정 아초 보여나이나 다 동철제기 타니데요 사로 요거 말에 당상 사르고 소요래 대마또 지 시급고 만촌나 마마보지 그 동철 그 나궁우의 ngu증가요 말에 대전도 다키베양 치는 말에 디즈 지금 용시신을 연래 이나요 다 자노가 로총다는 게바 베 망보고 잡나더니 동철가 나빠잔다 베 망보요 건데 다 코줄 샘그 등거다나 랑거 다리가 니처자가 셔디 저런디 당아 베 샘농라 다리가 더니 등거 전부 좀 정도 되나 다로 망보지기네단 니타다 그 샘커다나 랑거 짐직심용
So depression is something that I've paid a lot of attention to and have done research into for many years now. The reason being that I've encountered so many people, particularly young people, but also older people in China, who are experiencing and have experienced great suffering in this regard. Depression as a word, a term, didn't exist in Tibetan. It's a new word that has been invented in recent times. The condition of depression obviously, therefore, wasn't something that was particularly widespread, but certainly in my experience in China, witnessing the great mental suffering of so many people and having contact with that, this is something that, I've really regard extremely serious, and for this reason have dedicated quite a lot of effort into coming to understand this illness.
다 나때 줄고니나 나때 주버시키 그 탑대 가르제나 셔던 거 내라 당상 샘컴을 방가래 그너 논식즈레 샘 영원 방에다는 되는 노식 매바조나 초코저요래. 양 당선 만반 가리가 그 샘들 롱기 또금 종화스레네 된디 샘다 첩보 용조원도 점기 지다만 동야다는 된자경 다리 응곡탑너리 된자세기요래.
In terms of treating this disease, there are different approaches. Psychologists may have different ways of attempting to treat the condition in terms of achieving states of mind. Doctors, at the same time, through their interventions, can attempt to control the symptoms of depression.
옛날에 다당상 회난 납쇼거만 가린 통디 teni mande chat songdi mande mandongdi yang dari semkum mabde yongre ta yena mande la tani doshok niba verna dari sem rnarda ne matap kyodan ranga dari alapa la sokba ga libola ono pa yonna dejindo tan chammo nyin mo kuma la sokba nyin mo khugyo de la sokba ga teni doshok niba moz gore deina ta mandonggi de yang tab chig re dana de dari tab yakshu de mare.
So while taking medicine may be one means of going about addressing depression, it's certainly not the best one. Clearly, when one stops taking meditation, the symptoms are still there. On the other hand, there are also all kinds of negative side effects associated with depression medication. So it's not the best means of treating depression that we have available to us.
출리라 따빠 요난자 맨난자 소지 상등군야 동인군야 더마인 바가 흥악도 이제다 잠판거 샤워줍죠 너츠 문이 장네 그거 딱 가요로 그 나때라다리 판바요지다 나때야라 짝탑교 그 되니 니 나다가 초와 그 냠용스르고난 자가 니 다리 럭링 것도 그 되게 체남발라 ngochu 디바지.
Myself, as a Buddhist teacher, I have had experience in witnessing the great success of Buddhist methods in addressing depression. These including meditation, emptiness meditation, mindfulness meditation, the recitation of mantra, practice, helping altruistic engagement. I have had experience of all of these methods being extremely effective in treating depression.
다 도머데 상통고야데 나가수 출근나나 때 나만이 연데 당선 롭자 몽보지그 상네 잠바니저거 상통데 탑거 너지 디츠 통통즈 그런 거 레세근데 그다나 임밥샤나 베르나 디럽 갸피르갑나 야체 침보 지발레 균지그갑나 척송원제나 근네 잠비 탁바이 샘기 랑친 랍다나 샘기 랑친 땀다나 직바 탐치 맹게르장 대와 말이 락도 톱제이다 딱 나마그니 베르나 샘도 람보치다바즈레 되니 잠바 땡아 수다리 잠바도 탁바다바즈레 알람보 첸도 탁바다고나 간 로트는 말에 디야와도 나츠 잠비고 샘도 사라한데레 샘도 사라 코르지즈이니나 더가 단 직된 그 감근 직바다 나 탐치 말아진죠 되니 대와다 가와 조와 너소 탐치경 럼지 맘붓 진대암 종용와 제이다나 사로 송요레.
So in recent times, there is a lot of discussion and a lot of enthusiasm for the meditation practice of mindfulness. This is something that has, though, always existed in the Buddhist tradition. In the great 8th century text, The Way of a Bodhisattva, there's a verse that says, "But if the elephant is firmly bound by the rope of mindfulness on every side, all fears will vanish and everything constructive will come into my hands." And so this verse is really likening the various afflictive thoughts of the mind to an elephant, and the mindfulness meditation method as the reins that bring this elephant under control. And when this is done, then positive mental experiences such as happiness, pleasure, etc., they are able to arise more readily.
잠바 니르적 곰디데 샘 락데이다. 等你sem将么平啊，这的两百家，第人的哪里俺么样啊？等你两百家，那第二人的样两百家，人的所以说呢，sem的罗丹邦，sem的占把的修行个过呢，让了因让的大概的，他的这个要参同步之间呢，当然得了相同的呢，对人的呢这个这点连对比两下。장내 모여래다. 대참 마시나요. 그러나 뜻다위 있는 거. 당선 롭자 몸보증나. 되네 상동 금교원도 배 만져 가르침 보더래.
So this kind of meditation where we focus single pointedly and are able to abide in this state, and in general with the various things that arise in our life, to be able to deal with them in this way is in fact a very important kind of meditation.
양 샤밥 제베다는 또 상통 검스럭 찍어래. 대치레제나 잠반이어를 적바 주 리 잠반이어를 적바 소라 잠반이어를 적바 셈 잠반이어를 적바 추 잠반이어를 적바지 다 잠반이어를 적바 주고 검래.
So mindfulness meditation is one very useful practice. Another meditation practice that has great relevance to depression is contemplative meditation. So where we can talk about the four applications of mindfulness, contemplating the body, the emotions, the mind, and phenomena.
그러나 리잠바 니어르정바이나 드니 렁글 린더 답시조거 뻑바 드니 하 척 리바 강 데라 소바 럼바 빈더 따게티로니나 드니 신능 와르섬 골리 더거 스토르먼 강당 강나인나라 ngo마인고나 짱마 딱바 띠르 따비랑 전저 라고 마라 ngaso 머장 그 로다 머장 그 카르기 티로나 단더 조하즈르 하 니하즈르 머하즈르지 베 조바 조기가 쓰라 대등 잡아장 그 ngaso 리금 토마 와르스 막 뜨게 티로나 드니 지 막상이랑 전잔즈가 무신이나 더양 리근 잠바데 자르죠.
So by contemplating the contemplation on the body, our clinging and our grasping to our physical forms can be lessened as we step by step, piece by piece, analyze each part of our body, from our skin to our bones, our blood, our organs, etc. And we come to a realization of its impure nature. This actually helps us in lessening our grasping to it.
드네 초라 등으로 와서이 다 초라 있나 대화당 등을 당님스 역섬요래 레다나 내급근 초라 대화잠 요나야 남지가 내급나 탐치보 머딱이라면서 잔자 머딱와 인저런 인저와 탐치 등으로 와서이 다 초라 강당 강 있나라는 남지가 내급나 다 머딱와다 등을 이라면서 잔 마토제면 딱바 대화 전 잡아서 요금에 놓아 때라 양 고아티에타브레.
And in terms of meditating on our emotions, this enables us to realize their impermanent nature, that there is happiness and that there is sadness, that they are essentially always changing. Anything that is changing is suffering. And so this kind of contemplation enables us to lessen our grasping towards emotions.
드네 셈 잠바니어를 적바테 당아 수셈 때라 지금 잠자 모스 나톤 차르 나톤 잠자 요래 레양 르바가 또게 처럼디 마오와 마르티와다나 네방 각차와 따따대양 까직 차와가 안에양 덕시아디 처리오나 드니 까직 차와 대양 랑진기 쩨바즈 마레 덴디 따티 셈대양 안에양 덕다게 처럼디 딕섬단 차와 딜라 마트니 셈메가 딕섬 젠디기다 드롭탁즈 마토 메누오테 니시양 따파티용.
And by contemplating or practicing the application of mindfulness in respect of our minds, in general, our minds are full of discursive thoughts of all kinds of nature, but by focusing on the current moment and nothing else, not the past and the future, then we can come to an understanding about the nature of our mind and not cling to ideas of its essential permanence or inherent existence.
드네 추 nga tsun jikten ga kamna shirur go ngubo da nang ga ngubo teni yodo juk tamchi daftaga chirionina teni tombani imba ta dagme pa imba tere.
And the contemplation regarding phenomena encourages us to develop a realization of the empty and selfless nature of phenomena.
Jamba niwer jabando loje ge chugur kamna ya yore nge tari jamba ni je je ge de kurang zu dan zhang de wei.
Of course, these 4 applications of mindfulness are in the southern tradition as well. I'm sure you know about them, yeah? Yeah. Have you learned about the 4 applications of mindfulness? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Foundation of mindfulness.
Yes. Is the content the same as what Kempo has just explained?
It's a Chittanupassana
Mm-hmm.
and about mind,
Mm-hmm.
and Dhammanupassana
Mm-hmm.
is the worldly phenomena,
Mm-hmm.
and is Kayanupassana about body,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one Vedananupassana about feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jipare.
야, 다 제남바 더니 타레 곰고르와 데 문이 때 곰나 다른가 야나랑아 지 샘컴 그 나때소 요나 맨로아다 카르테 더가 요 카르테 맨나 마오 네컴나 샘테 나때소 응고용래.
By engaging in this kind of meditation practice, it really does have the capacity to heal mental afflictions, heal mental illness, and for people who may not, in fact, have or feel themselves to be mentally afflicted or to suffer from a mental illness, by engaging in meditation is actually a very good preventative measure for future mental illness.
돈다가 니바다 드니 ngama 드니 오마가 감나 덕면 드는 조아 남저스 주던 강사가 예ver 남력 송제 드니 조아 심친의 조류시던 추 덕매 빠지바즈다 강사가 덕매 빠 지다나 덕매가 니 송제 조 마수 가서되는 거다 낫 파르체와즈의 심 그덕대라 하장 담부르든 바다 덕대 하장 더가 단 점바 침보시 차버도 납쇼고 뭐소이네나 되네지 랑데 지 냥톱 치워다나 랑데 담부른 점바 랑땀 작종 된자가 nd시 지 찹침분을 리어레 단 내라 되네 저런 되네야 난라면자 쇼원 저런이나 소띠 님보 또 새로 시키데 덕매 남바님 검교 nd까르 침보레.
And then the second Buddhist measure that can be very, very effective is selflessness. It was said by Chandrakirti that the Buddha taught 2 kinds of selflessness of the person and selflessness of the phenomena, so that beings may obtain liberation. In actual fact, a lot of mental illness that is suffered by people today is related to a very strong sense of self and a very strong sense of clinging and grasping to self. Maybe this is particularly strong among people in the West. In any case, meditation on selflessness, the 2 kinds of selflessness, is very important in this context.
다 근데 돈덕 선바다 네데랑 체 남발라 드니 생각 잡을잔스 돈지라 드니 티 생각텔라 때니 님바텔라 때니 우니 장네 그 뭐뭐지 그다 동설그 나다 니우니나 다 망학조 드니 동설그 나스르게 베나가라 nga shiu mamba maretana nang semga tak mamba zejona ngarang 그 랑토 잠다 ngarger sam mahimba ga teni momboji ga ta tongser ga natte teni chak sangwi chani na tinda labjana ya teji topa zgdana teji droptak zgda mun samgyu ngarang la ichiyo.
And then the third measure that I would like to share with you tonight is a mantra that is very effective in addressing depression, one that I have had a great deal of personal success with, actually, in helping other people to overcome their depression. While I may not be a doctor of the body, I have, without any sense of pride or arrogance, have had great success in helping many people overcome depression through this method. So I would, in fact, refer to it as my main pith instruction.
단디 상응도 응응데라 총거 랑깅운이양 냠린 인롱우 바르도 시니연 체레제나가 지르고 야치 꺄길로 랍도 쇼니 로 시미 갑데나 드니 사차 잠바즈가 추추샤단 조디 드니 다 람금 캄보 다즈르제지 곰바가 나네 콩르긴 자송아 콩르 야거네 용아레 드니 콩르 야거네 용디 나라 이게 칸돈 덤바 주진송 디 덤바도 잠바 총에 지금 당일 쉬지 말아다 디는 거 이게 덴마크 찍도 따따와도 그게 그 런거 진동 거 진동 그 잡도 zonje 다 키르남빙 가레가 처음 맞던 수인한데 옛매치네요 다 되게 추었다니 있는데라 지금 산로를 따내다 그따리 언덩이 군이 응우요니 쓰르즈레 데니나 니 이게 데만드 땅 아담 냠도 물론 니시담바 nga kanga songnara는 리다 맘저레 다가 딩이 진던 창에 송린.
And this mantra, this tantric mantra, was actually given to me in 1986. It's one that I have practiced for almost 30 years now. Back then I was on my way to a teaching in a monastery, and on the way I met with Khenpo Deza, who had actually returned from India, and he gave me this instruction manual or practice manual, and I have one page of it here, and I really feel that it has extraordinary efficacy, and I've experienced this and have continued its practice over almost 30 years.
ngarangi sikap tambo me chirezena ji 가정의 롭작 nga만에 주자니엔 담보 지 만바에 삼는더니 길긴에 삼는 시가 잠바가 일긴 락되는 기른로아진 근데 지마 단디노나 뭐 산기 모여와지 온더리 다 산기 모여와도 런거 샘지 게로하다 샘지 등을 모으서 세르제 쉬어요래 다 띠인디 지망인디 이게 nd때니다나 당운이 ngaran거 삼나요 샤와 강다 강점나 지 이트 담보 어더니 샤와 다리가 고요 nga요 된자즈 레척 뭐yen 되니나 또 이런 거 있나 다 저런 거 이처럼 치 마치용 강다리야 이런 게 있는데 지금 니바 침보다 신럽 침보자 저거요.
To begin with, I wouldn't describe myself as someone who was unmovable in my personality. I went through many phases of wanting to be a doctor, wanting to be a teacher, and etc. But really, from the point in time that I began to do this practice and chant this mantra of the Akshobhya Buddha, the immovable one, I really discovered that my undertakings, my endeavors and my aspirations became solid, became stable, and I have great belief. I don't know whether or not, in fact, you do, you might or you might not, but I really feel that this mantra is one that has great power and also great power of blessing.
다데나 지마 디 생각나나 이게 주요한 말에 그 임접주 온도 때니 지 척직네 범그 야르마토나 드니 나랑 당하니 뭐몽보지가 지 뭐몽보즈가 던자제 맘뇨 옛나야 니 게르게 드니 지가 다 코랑 안반 나고 데제니나 다 춘디 범 척직 야르마톤조 제 드니 뭐몽보즈도 드니 다리 적송 저런 강타리야나 노바요지 말했삼고 출리가 잠바 수이나 냠슬랑네나 허랑 아주 만이나 만도 출릭 답바 요메 단텐자 말에 ngakni ba de yo janjare 데라 지 출기 잠바다나 답바요메 그 쳐버지 말해 데라 니바 쳐버장조데 머시 냠스 라나요 다리 총제 데나 아 그 넘바 촐라 데랑이 무스르 그 지킨 모즈가 그 따가이 처럼이다 대랑인디 생각도 다리 쳐남바 마라 아 그 지금 돈지네 되네 쳐남바 곰코요나 라랑 급지잖아 되네 지마 잠바가 춘예즈난 된다면 요네나 코란라 다리가 데스타वन 동갑지나 냔제.
So this mantra, in fact, doesn't have many words. It has, in fact, only 10 syllables. It's not one that I've, taught or before lots and lots of people, but certainly on an individual basis over time I've really shared it with a lot of people, and they've really had enjoyed great success from it. I don't feel it's one that you necessarily have to have religious faith in order to derive efficacy from, in the same way that medicine can be beneficial to people regardless of whether they have a particular belief or not. I feel that this mantra has efficacy in and of itself. So if you have the need, feel free to write it down, and in the future if you encounter someone who would be in need of it or who would benefit from it, feel free to share it with them.
단데 옴잔자 마하로카나 홍팟 오야 옴잔자 마하로카나 홍팟 옴잔자 마하로카나 홍팟 단데 다리 그러나 nga 랑커 랑커 지거 납독다 된다지 말에 마총 보그 사차나 다래가 더니 다 하정 괴바 진보 좀 펌거 공거 측송을 주잖아 단디 흥거근도 란 지금 돈제스 있나 더근 잠보는 걸 하다 흘러다 노진 라소바 탐치 다리가 노바 탐치 저런지로 송어래.
The efficacy of this mantra is not something that I'm making up myself. I should add here that I forgot to add before that Kempo would advise somebody who would like to recite this mantra to recite it 10 times or even upwards of to 100,000 of times for benefit. In any case, the great efficacy potency of this mantra was described by the great Tibetan master Mipan Rinpoche, who described it as having the power to surmount all of the deities, nagas and spirits.
대전도 름느 탐sit 다리가 매버린 게로 하다나 참매 비ringala 소바거 득바 탐sit 적버린 게로 송을.
The ability to even rectify or purify any of the 5 boundless actions that are undertaken.
네, 다지 지르게 왕작 그 나츠 레카 감접니나 출랍되는 레카 접교 ndso 탐sit 양탁버는 접기다나 대전도 다 듣당 varchilla 소바가 드니 강기 양 멋지게 다나 대덕 탐sit 그 단디 흥역도나 출글라 따빠 요난자 맨난자 드니 랑라 때타위 나 요난자 맨난자 닝우니 난다 하정 가르침보서 써요.
And in terms of the various activities and endeavors we engage in our everyday life, it gives us the ability to carry these out very effectively and smoothly, to overcome obstacles, to eradicate barriers. Regardless of whether we have religious faith or not, it's a mantra with great potency, whether we are afflicted with illness or whether we are not.
네 나추고 조바근디 대런 그 차천도 조직 고직 잡직소래 더 잡직소니나 네 나추고 공바 나추고 다 런거 샘기 납주르시 지그 토모 마임비 망어 대다리 켈남바테랑 단다나 레리오 그 너쇼고 마이난자가 샤르쇼고 마이난자가 마총 청마라 샘기 난메사도 배 공부래 대인이나 참말라 다리 펌비체트 되나 먹스르거 더가 버라인.
So tonight, because tonight's teaching was organized by the Buddhist Society here at Cambridge University, I wanted to share with you this profound teaching, a pith instruction. Today, people without mental afflictions are extremely few, and so I would, and I decided that I would like to share with this great teaching with everybody, regardless of whether they're from the East or from the West or wherever. It really does have great power.
네, 아무스르도 지구바지가 그거 돈다니요. 돈다 찍도 맞춘 연등 그 소화가 쳤다. 맞세가 쳤다. 네처 강당 강쇼나. 대체 쇼나 자가 등으로 쇼나 자. 그거 단 소위 여름 그 쳤다. 네처 강라 특나. 아더니 점바 첨부 머직지다나. 당 아주 멋지지긴데 지 대체 단 등으로니가 라마리다. 아주 사차 mambo나 카회즈 거너래 라리 잡나 터지 시트 잡나 드그레제 네 멋세지게도 답변나 람 통보즈가 야르잖아 양 마라 터즈 바브란제 양 그가 탕즈가 하라 손디 양 라즈간 거고나 아주 랑코리 있나 사차 소소소소 로고디 드니 람 잠자 모원 조건도가 대당 자와가 멋센데 양나 지 니마치그 베르나 다리 다른 거 샘그 가마있나 나조 등으로 시조 데키리네 신조 대와이네 양 상공 오늘 끝나냐 초라 잠바요네 다 땡진 직된즈래 대니나 네서칸라 특나야 참마가 야라지 샘그 스톱식 기에 되나 더가 네 샤완도 조 탐치다 동린 샤완도 조 탐치다 당린 시조 좀바시조 너까르쳔보래.
The other thing that I would like to talk or to urge as extremely important in our lives, it's inevitable that we will confront all kinds of ups and downs. Moments of happiness, moments of unhappiness. We have a saying, an idiom in Tibetan, which says, after you go up a mountain, then you go down. After a moment of happiness, then there's sadness. This changeable nature is in fact the absolute reality of our everyday lives, and it's very important that in the face of whatever we encounter, that we maintain a mind that is at ease.
아니 긴던가 다리 공동이 지지래 다 출가 로종 시지 점직 시인데 다 디름 열식 발라 메토 모롱 와서래 체레제나 다 추가 드니 담에 그타와 있는 자가 스템저 그타와 있는 자가 너초가 수암로 되가 마추 긴던가 초와텔라 판바 이제 침부도 토거요래.
The other thing is, particularly in the 21st century, the study and the research into Buddhism is absolutely indispensable, whether it be the view of selflessness or whether it be dependent origination. All of these views, these doctrines, are of direct and absolute relevance to our everyday lives.
가성한다나 제조인데 간프를 높쳤네 타르시는 걸 로마 다 지금 그런 거 때문에 야채제와하고 견지 그 헤르블레가 로존식이요스 다 로존신우 띠 르하다 때문에 오늘 전에 그 그런 몸 살게요스 가리 점수가리잖아 당아서 가르쇼고 뭐 디럽디럽디르다 가모지가 내까나 때문에 낭 샘기 오늘처럼 쉬를 공부본다 졸라 딱신 된자스 더주산 배 얌선 찍어서 오늘 전에 된다래 아주 쉬우부 원드시나 더 야가리 난자 보이리 난자 백교보래 레다 능 샘기 야라 나트는 능 샘데 야라 지 헤르브 짠 바리오노 닝오네나 카르쇼데나 오네가 지 참에 로정 시기지나 베나 제체제발라가 교인직인 저진잖아 다로 된자 몸보지그나나 되니 그런 거 스타반데 마라 척도요 마라 아주 뭐는 바 롭자 침보 롬구 통그 때문에 샷좀 전에나 그런 맛이 공간에 종이 직된 감수 시차로라 더 대단 잡아서 많이 봐가 좀 되라 용 되라 차치요 노도 맞좀 처음에 꼴고네.
In particular, the Way of the Bodhisattva, written in the 8th century, this is something that everybody, particularly students engaged in their doctoral research or whatever it may be, should really read, and it contains such an amazing wisdom. In actual fact, I encountered a student who had actually graduated, and they remarked to me about just how amazing, in fact, they found this wisdom, even in general. Even though we can say that in terms of the outer level of development, places like Tibet, etc., are, really quite poor, but the intense wisdom of this text and others like it is unsurpassable and very much worth the study and attention of everyone.
Nothing Sanjibag Chulula Chichetayara to Goyanara, Dendra Chame, Garizena, Matsu, Jimson and Dambayana, Sanji Chulu Batela, and Unitani, Gabatona Chore, Goa, Gabatona de, Gabade, Ta, Tuntola Sunyoda, then it's Sata Dayonena. Then Chulbagger Joinery, they couldn't get down the Malona Kuranga Joinery. Then Maransuina, Muni Chu, Sanjibi Chulina, Ta, Jamba So, Kurantela, Gabatona, Gabate, Darlin Chikiore, the Gabat Ton Chore, Gabat Ton Gore, Matsu, Boyu Nantung and Anayana Pay, Sopati, the Roland Tamchikanana, Lojon Tamchikanana, Sopan the Karchimbola.
And in terms of, raising objections, engaging with the teachings critically, this is absolutely advisable. There is absolutely no problem whatsoever with objections being raised, and indeed they should. Within the Tibetan tradition, we regard debate and rational investigation as really being the crux of our study methodology.
Donda Tamada, Natsu, Somaga, Tene, Janla Pambago, Shawa Dripjunda, Berna, Ju Gili Taka, Dan Kori Chonchuka Shawa in Nanjaga, Tene Napa on the Japjura, Dan the Sola Chitare, Regendunga, Tene Pamba Drujuo, Chaber the Rana Susungunina, Tene Pama Geko, the Sola Kurta down, Shankyung, Shijo, Hajankar Chembore, Nga Europe Sachana Yonde. Genko Mombo to the Corona Pug or Stanky Medina, then a Coron Shosonres, the Jigger Namter Mombo Sorkando. Tendraina, Netina, Masu Hershoksuina, Pamada, Girgan La Chenlanzida, then a Chun Chimbo Tamchikanana, Pamada Girgan the Studiore. Then a Lochonsu in Nena, de la Chunzu Chetayan, Pet, Arizumba Yachimbo Shegiore. Tendras Gregoni, then a Rangi Pamadana. 다 genkon도 수시사가 전조와 미르다나 던조가 참말라지 라니 거에 그거 그냥 샤와가 판바줍지 원데 가르쳐야래.
And then the final thing that I would like to stress is the absolute importance of doing things that benefit others, whether that be other human beings or other animals, whether it be work towards protection of the environment or towards helping ill people or refugees, whatever it may be. One thing in particular is the importance of looking after elderly family members. The Eastern tradition talks about the great debt of gratitude that younger people have to teachers and to parents. This is extremely important. However, in coming to Europe, Kemble has heard of many instances where many old people have essentially died in situations where they haven't had the care or attention of their children. So looking after one's parents and fulfilling these responsibilities is clearly an important thing to do. Thank you very much.
Dewa samji chi chana ra to gang ye se 地真地真你我上，到了你多半夜人就是南面上真找的丢给他。大家看你们都干嘛动让他那有的话那么着吧人本老板30的人人的病就不下我这不中间了家跟的要是见不的人在我一人去身上跟得上不莫那么的单不上去说把江总他是说马我南京那个家个这上的我咱家走断在到的上端面跟人多的街那真真的别问他都说人类间的现在那么简单不在的身上的给我在东北三个老的多其实你不在现在做不来说因的你里面多那么半的话节奏一个那也来我那的过来真就三个我要当的说这些刚是本座的人的马里一个年走是什么没些个把咱家们也不给了那一早上家白酒那把什么的那个人真把也的个早起您的勇敢上把的下着下雨真的头戴上的几百张